So this week's parasha is Parashat Emor. Very interesting character at the end of the parasha. It talks about the MEGADEF. I'll read the Pesukim, and we'll get some background in regards to this character, and then we'll see some very interesting connections with different characters and different similarities with almost an identical story. First things first, we should know that we are in we're in Torat Kohanim. Sefer Vayikra is a book that most of it deals with the work of the Kohanim. This story has nothing to do with it. It's really out of the blue. The fact that there's something here that's mentioned Torat Kohanim could have been mentioned anywhere else. So the fact that it's coming here between all these mitzvot, it's very interesting why. We'll see a reason for it in a little bit. And above and beyond that, we see over here that it deals with something that is has no connection to the previous Pesukim to it, or the ones that preceded. So let's get started with the Pesukim. It says, Vayitze ben isha Yisraelit, vehu ben ish Mitzri, betoch bnei Yisrael. Vaynutzu b'machane ben הישראלית באיש הישראלי, ויקוב ben האישה הישראלית את השם ויקלל, והביאו אותו אל משה ושם אמו שלומית בת דברי למטה דן. So the story in a nutshell is these few Pesukim. There was an individual who was the son of an Israelite, and he's also the son of an Egyptian. So he's half the son of a Jewish woman and half of an Egyptian man. And he was betoch bnei Yisrael. He was living with the Jewish people in the desert. Vaynitzu b'machane ben Yisraelit v'ish Yisraeli. Now we have an altercation. We see a fight happening within the camp between the son of the Israelite woman and an Israelite man. Later on, we'll see who these two people are. Very, very interesting. Notice that they're not mentioning their names. Obviously, they're not very important people. When the Torah doesn't go to the extent of saying a person's name, it's only because it's hiding their character, because they're not worth mentioning. But later on, we'll see who they really are. Vayikov ben haisha Yisraelit et Hashem vayikalel. And the son of the Israelite woman, who's also half Egyptian, cursed out, or we're not going to say cursed God, but we're going to say quote unquote bunny ears, he blessed God. Vayaviu oto el Moshe, and they brought him to Moshe for judgment. V'shem imo Shulamit bat Divri l'matei Dan, and his mother's name happens to be Shelomit bat Divri, the daughter of Divri. She comes from the tribe of Dan. So first things first, let's try to unveil the characters. Let's try to unveil who they are. So it says, Ben Isha Yisraelit Vehu Ben Ish Mitzri. He's the son of an Israelite, and he's also the son of an Egyptian. So in Sefer Shemot, the Torah talks about the time, it recounts the time that Moshe Rabbeinu went to see the Jewish people suffering in Egypt. How they were under slave labor, hard labor. And one of those days while Moshe was visiting with his brethren, walking around Egypt looking at the Jews suffering as slaves, he witnessed something. He saw Ish Mitzri Makeh Ish Ivri Me'echav. He saw an Egyptian hitting a Jew, one of his brothers. Vayifen ko vako. He turned right, he turned left. Vayar ki en ish. And he saw that there was no one looking. Vayachet ha-Mitzri vayitmeneu b'chol. He hit the Egyptian, he killed him, and he buried him in the sand. Just so you should know that this is also famously known that Moshe Rabbeinu looked left and looked right, meaning he looked in his previous, he looked at his genealogy. He looked at his family before. He looked at his genealogy in the future. Were there any tzaddikim before? Any good people before him? Are there any good people, righteous people that will come out of him? When he saw that there was nothing going to come out of him, he used God's holy name, Shema Mefurash, and he killed him with God's name. Because when you learn it in first grade, you think that Moshe Rabbeinu knocked him out, right? And then he buried him. But in reality, it was it was on a higher level. So, furthermore, as it says, וסיבת הדבר שאותו מצרי קרא את אותו עברי. He says, and you know why that Egyptian was hitting that Jew? Rashi tells him, Rashi reveals to us on that pasuk, that particular Egyptian had his eye on this Jew's wife. And in the middle of the night, he came up with a plan. He says, I'll wake him up in the early hours of the morning, and I'll tell him that he has to go to the field, he has to go to work. There's more work today. He'll wake him up in the middle of the night. And again, middle of the night in Egypt, it's pitch dark. You can't see anything. And after he sent away that Jew to go work on the field, he himself went back into the dwellings of the Jew, and he went into the bedroom or to the area of his wife, and he had relations with her. She thought she was with her husband, but she was really with the Egyptian. However, when the Jew came back to his house, he saw and understood quickly what had happened. And when the Egyptian saw that the Jew was onto him and he caught his actions, he would beat him up and he would torment him and torture him until Moshe Rabbeinu saw that he was overly, excessively mean to him or excessively torturing him. And that's when Moshe Rabbeinu got involved and killed him. And that woman, her name was Shulamit Badivri. And she got pregnant from that Egyptian, and from that pregnancy came the child Ben Isha Israelit, Vehu Ben Ish Mitzri. That's why he's the son of an Israelite, but his father is also an Egyptian. Furthermore, Ben Ish Mitzri, that Egyptian that they talk about, happens to be also the Egyptian that Moshe Rabbeinu killed in Egypt. So if you want to start connecting the dots, this is one of them. That Egyptian that Moshe Rabbeinu killed in Egypt was the Egyptian that tricked that Israelite and slept with his wife. By the way, you know what's his name? You know what his name was? So we know that in Egypt they had shotrim v'noksim. What shotrim? They had officers that were Jews, that were in charge of the Jews, and on top of them were Egyptian officers that were in charge of them. Their job was to make sure that the Jews were filling their quotas, their daily quotas of bricks. And if they weren't filling their quotas of bricks, then the officers on top of them would have to answer for it. So they had sort of like this hybrid position between the Jewish slave and the Egyptian officers. In the Torah, we know of two gentlemen that had that position. Their name was Datan and Aviram. Happens to be that this child is Datan's child. He's actually Datan's child. So now let's start connecting the dots. The mother is Shulamit ben Divri from the tribe of Dan. She was married to Dotan, who was the officer. The Egyptian is the Egyptian that Moshe killed. And now we have a little bit more an idea of all the people that are involved. We're starting to connect the dots. There's more, by the way. There's more. Just to get things started. Furthermore, the question is going to be, why did this happen? Right? Why did this happen? This is such a harsh story on the side of Shulamit. It seems as if she was innocent. She did nothing, and she got tricked by the Egyptian. We would say even that she was he forced himself upon her, and now she got into this position where she's pregnant.
How could she not know? How could she not know that it's not her husband?
It was dark, middle of the night. She was sleeping. Continues to say, "Lo bechinam natan hamitzri einav dafka b'shulamit badivri." He says the Egyptian, it's not for nothing that he chose specifically Shulamit. He could have gone into anybody's home. Why specifically into her home? כי טבע הרע של אותה אישה היה תמיד להסתובב בחוצות ולפטפט הרבה ולשאול בשלום כל איש ואיש שהייתה פוגשת דרכה. She had a very bad character trait. You know what was the problem with Shulamit? She was very talkative. She'd like to go out into the streets and talk to everyone. And every man that she saw, she would say, hello, how are you? She'd like to chat it up with everyone. Furthermore, it says, why is her name Shulamit bat Divri? Rashi brings us Shulamit. משום שהייתה מפטפטת לרוב ואומרת לכל איש שלום עליך, שלום עליך, שלום עליכם. Shulamit, her name is Shulamit because she would say shalom to everybody. Hello, 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 hello. She would speak to every single person. Bat Divri, why is she called Bat Divri? Hashem שהייתה דברנית, ומדברת עם כל אדם. She'd be very talkative. She'd talk it up with any person. ולכן בסופו של דבר דווקא לה הרע שמצרי נתן בה את עיניו והתאבא ממנו בבן פגום. And that's why specifically she's the one that this story happened to, that she's the one that got impregnated by the Egyptian, and she had a son who was a blemished son, let's call him. Now, this is sort of the roots of this child. What happened with this child? So obviously she gave birth to him. He was raised in Egypt. He was part of the Exodus. He was part of Yetziat Mitzrayim. And now they're in the desert. When PARASHAT EMOR, they're learning all the laws of the Kohanim. And all of us, and they're all encamped. I mean, remember, this is after the Mishkan is built already. So all the tribes have a place. You know, each tribe has a place of where they're able to encamp. And all of a sudden, he feels the story transpires. You see, it's as it says. So as everybody's setting up their tents, he sets up his tent in the tribe of Dan section. He says, my mother is from the tribe of Dan, so surely I should set up my tent in the area of Dan. So comes one guy and stops him. That's the Ish Israeli. Remember the Pesukim said there was another man that he got into a fight with? Ish Israel. מבני שבט דן, מחה בו. על כך משום שחניית השבטים הייתה על פי שבטו של האב, ולא על פי שבטה של האם. There was one person that got up. Right now we know him as Ish Israeli, but later on we'll see who he is also. Very, very interesting. And he stops him and he tells them, excuse me, we encamp according to the tribe of the father. Your mother is Shevet Dan. Your father is not Shevet Dan. You can't be here. So because they didn't allow him to encamp in tribe of Dan, because his father was Egyptian and only his mother was from the tribe of Dan, they brought him to court. They brought him to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu judged, he says, no, according to the law, you're not able to encamp here with the Jewish people. You have to go and encamp with the Erev Rav on the outside. יצא אותו בן והחל לקלל ולגדף את משה רבנו שפסק את הדין, ואף את הקדוש ברוך הוא אשר פי דיני תורתו פסק משה רבנו מה שפסק. So right after he came out of court, he started to yell, scream, and curse Moshe Rabbeinu, and he continued to even curse HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He didn't like the judgment, Moshe's judgment, and he didn't like the judgment that was according to the law of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So after he blasphemed and he cursed, Moshe Rabbeinu said, take him to a holding cell, quarantine him. Until Hashem tells us exactly what is the judgment that is supposed to be for someone who acts in such a manner. Because in reality, nobody knew, including Moshe, if this person at the moment warrants death or not, or a different type of punishment. HaKadosh Baruch Hu answers Moshe and he tells him, הוצא את המקלל אל מחוץ למחנה ושמחו כל השומעים את ידיהם על ראשו ורגמו אותו כל העדה. Kadosh Baruch Hu instructs Moshe Rabbeinu to take out the blasphemer and put him outside of the camp, and the ones that heard him curse put their hands over his head and then take stones and stone him. וכפי שציווה השם, כן עשו בני ישראל. And that's just the same way that God commanded, that's what the Jewish people did. ויוציאו את המקלל אל מחוץ למחנה וירגמו אותו אבן. They took him out, the blasphemer outside of the camp, and they stoned him with a stone. That's the story.
Did they die?
Yes, he died. So that's the beginning of the story. I would like to start peeling the onion, layers and layers and layers and layers of things that are happening beneath the surface, and then we're going to go to another character, not in this week's parasha, not even in this book. We're going to find him in Parashat Shlach Lecha, in Sefer Bamidbar. But before we get there, I want to thoroughly understand and thoroughly learn the story of the Megadef.
What does that mean? I'm sorry, what does the word Megadef mean?
Megadef and Mekalel is the same thing. It's the person that cursed God.
Thank you.
Okay, Mefarshei Pshat give us a lot of insight in regards to what's going on over here. It says, let's start now taking the Pesukim and dissecting them. It says, Vayetze ben Isha Israelit vehu ben Ish Mitzri. It says that this blasphemer, the one that's half Jewish and half Egyptian, Vayetze, he came out. So we ask the question, came out from where? Again, we want to understand every little bit and piece of these Pesukim. Vayetze, mechan yetza. He says, Yetza mitoch ha'halom uba betoch ha'am. Pshat, understanding the Ramban says, he came out of his tent and now he wants to intermingle with the nation. Another commentary brings that he Yetza lariv. He went to fight. His intentions was to fight. Rashi says, Yetza me'olamo. He left his world, meaning he lost his world. Klomar yafsid olam hazeh ve'olam haba. Through this action, this individual lost his life in this world, and he also lost his life in the next world.
Sharone, where was he camped before he went into that?
He was with the Erev Rav. Oh, where we camped? No, this is apparently this is when they just started to camp. And as soon as he started to camp, he's like, okay, so what about me? So when they came to camp for the first time, he's like, where do I belong? And then this whole thing transpired. Furthermore, יצא מתוך תחום שראוי לו, ובא לתוך ישראל למקום שאינו שלו. יצא, he came out from where? He came out from the place that is not warranted for him. And he went into a place that is not his proper place. So that's why the word are called yatsa, right? Furthermore, Vehu ben ish mitzri. So we ask a question for why do we even have to know this story? Could this whole Torah have been just fine without the story? If we didn't have the story, I'm sure there's like millions of other stories that happen that we're not privy to, or we're not documented, or not in the Torah, or not in the Midrashim. Could we have done without this story? So the reason why this story was included, one of the reasons, להודיע שאין אחד מישראל נכשל בחטא עצום כזה, אלא פושע מוחלט wants to show us. The reason why the Torah mentions it is because no one, not a single person within the Jewish nation, actually failed in such a way like this gentleman, and to show us the severity of the sin, that nobody ever did it before, the severity of the sin, how there was only one, and to show us that the only reason why it was him is because he's blemished. His genealogy, where he comes from, his father was corrupt, his father was wicked, and that's why the child came out wicked. That's Rabbeinu Bachke. Siftei Chachamim says, כשאמרו לו באותות לבית אבותם כתיב, he says, when he asked the question, why can't I encamp with you guys here? I want to be here in the in the Shevet Dan. שאל אותה, מי היה אבי? He says, who's my father? Meaning he himself did not know. אמרו לו, מצרי שרג משה בשם המפורש. Your father? Your father is the Egyptian that had Moshe Rabbeinu killed with the Shem HaMeforash, with God's holy name. Miyad amad v'gidef. Immediately he stood, he started to get defensive, and he started to curse. Siftei Chachamim makes it seem as if he had no idea that his father was the Egyptian, as if he's finding out for the first time. So you can imagine it's a very emotionally charged moment. And you know that sometimes when you're in those moments that are emotionally charged, you lose control of your decision-making process. Your emotions take over. You get angry. And sometimes you even curse. Chas v'shalom, not us. But you can see that it happens in a Gentile society. And that's what happened. You can see the series of events. And it says over there that he vayikalel, that he cursed. We don't like to say the word curse, we can say that he blessed. So what did he use? Cheref shemo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He actually knew God's Shem HaMeforash, and he used the Shem HaMeforash to curse. Hashem HaNichbad VaNorah, Hashem HaGadol. Bar Benel says the secret name of God, that's the name that he used to curse. So where does he know that name from? Well, it was said in Har Sinai. Everybody heard that name in Har Sinai, so he knew it also, and he used it as well. השם, אותיות משה, למפרע כשנודע שמשה הרג את אביו בשם מפורש, קילל גם את השם וגם את משה. He says that when he found out that Moshe is the one that killed his father with the Shem HaMeforash, he says that I'm going to take the Shem HaMeforash and curse Moshe and God. Interesting. A few more pieces about his mother. בשם אמו של שולמית בן דברי למטה דן. He says, Rabbeinu Bachya says, you know what you learn from the story? מי שנראה בו סימני עזות ופסלות, ראוי לבדוק אחרי אמו. He says, when you see somebody who's brazen, somebody who has a terrible attitude, somebody who is starting to show wicked signs in his personality, go check his mom. There's something wrong with the mother. Rabbeinu Bachya. Furthermore, Rashi says, the reason why we also mention Shulamit בת דברי, להודיע שפחם של ישראל, שפרסמה כתוב לומר שהיא לבתה זנתה. He says also the reason why we have this story and the reason why we are mentioning Shulamit בת דברי is to teach us that this is a unique incident. 210 years the Jewish people are in the desert. 210 years they're surrounded by Egyptians. 210 years they're surrounded by a corrupt culture. And we see that they even went to the 49th level of Tumah, yet not one Jewish girl ever went with an Egyptian. Even on the 49th level of Tumah, she still never went with an Egyptian, except for Shulamit. So he said, if there was one, let's highlight her, so we can see and learn from her what she did wrong, so we can learn not to do the same.
But it was
She
not
doesn't know she was forced. I mean, she didn't do it purposely. And then I was wondering, how do they know that this child is from this Egyptian? She was married.
It looks like Arab.
Yes.
So we're going to answer those questions, but just to give you a quick answer right now, anybody who has the character of being a married woman and going into the street and talking to every single man, that's what brought that upon her.
She might have known.
She brought it upon herself. She has all these wicked Egyptians all around, and she's out there talking, hello, hello, hello to everybody. That they said, the gnuta. This was what was bad about it. She aroused the eyes of wicked people on her. So one guy focused in on her, and he went for it. He went and he says, I'm going to, he did what he did. And why did he do that? Because she was there in his eye. All the other women, where were they? At home. Door closed, waiting for their husband to come from work. She wasn't. She was a Yetzanit. So after they quarantined him, they tied him up, they left him alone, they put him in a jailhouse, as Unkulu says. But why is it that they quarantined him? Don't you know what to do with a guy that acts in such a way? So the answer is no, they did not know. It was a first time event, and because they didn't know, they quarantined him to know what to do in such a situation. And right here, I'll just stop and say, Chazakim ubruchim Am Yisrael. Because why? Last time they didn't know what to do. What happened? Chet HaEgel. They jumped to conclusions. Let's do this, let's do that. Blah, 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 blah. Over here, they didn't know what to do. Freeze. Stop. Where's Moshe? Oh Hashem, they learned from their mistakes. We saw that not too long ago, the minute they had some issue and they didn't know what to do, they took it upon themselves to problem solve and act on it before even consulting with the chief rabbi of that time. Over here, we see that they learned from their mistakes. Right after Chet HaEgel, the minute something came up, they said, freeze, stop, where's the rabbi? Chazakim u'bruchim Am Yisrael. And we see that over here, that they had a safek, they had a doubt. They didn't know if lo yadu im bichlal chayav mita, maybe needs to be killed. It says, "Lamdu kal v'chomim kal aviv ve'imo shechayav mita, ach lo ratzu la'ansho min adin." It says, listen, we know that we learned there's a mitzvah lo ta'aseh, that a person is not allowed to curse their mother and their father. As it says, "Mekalel aviv ve'imo mot yumat." Anybody who curses his parents, his punishment is death. So kal v'chomer, if for your human parents, if you curse them, you die. Kal v'chomer, obviously, if you're going to curse God, it's going to be the same punishment, if not worse. But they didn't want to take it upon themselves, even though there might be like an easy way of understanding it. They said, still, we don't know what the law is. We'll wait for Moshe Rabbeinu. Torah Emor brings that because he cursed Moshe and he also cursed God, so they didn't know what is he liable for. Is he liable because he cursed God? Or is he liable because he cursed Moshe? Both? Just one? Neither? All? So they said, let's wait on that. One last thing that was very interesting in the way that they killed him. They put all the ones that heard him blaspheme God, they put their hands on his head, and they're the ones that heard it or the ones that stoned him. So they said, Lama what was the whole idea of putting their hands upon him? So Rashi explains, he says, the reason why we're doing this is because you're the one that's responsible for this. You're the ones who brought this upon yourself, and we're not going to get punished because of you. Furthermore, Hiskuni brings, the way that it works in court is that the witnesses that saw the wrongdoing, it's upon them to repeat what they saw. So what did they repeat? They have to repeat God's holy name, Shema Meforash. So they say, if we're going to say Shema Meforash, we're going to get punished. We're not allowed to say Shema Meforash. Shema Meforash is only for the Kohanim or for the ones that it was revealed to them. כיוון שהדיינים היו צריכים לומר לעדים שיחזרו על הכללה, לכן סמכו ידיהם עליו כאומרים לו, העוון הזה של הזכרת ברכת השם בשנית על ידינו יחול על ראשו. The fact that we're repeating God's holy name again because of your sin, that's your fault, and you're getting punished for it, not us. Yalkut Shimoni chimes in and he says that this Shema Meforash he heard from Har Sinai, and Me'am Loez adds something very interesting. Tafmin Bet. יש אומרים שהישראל הזה אמר למשה, הוא אמר לו שמשה הבן הורג את אביו בשם המפורש, ולכן התחיל לחייב לגדף את עצמו. He says that it was revealed to him at that moment that Moshe Rabbeinu used the Shem HaMefurash to kill his father, and just because he heard that that's the way his father went, that's the reason why he actually chose that method of reacting and using God's name to curse. It says in Yalkut Shimoni something very interesting about the Jewish culture at that time. It says that this thing that happened, this isolated incident of Shulamit bat Divri, is very unique. Why? Sarah ירדה למצרים וגדרה עצמה מן הערווה ונגדרו כל הנשים בזכותה. Sarah Imenu, when she went down to Egypt, she was very careful not to, she was kidnapped by Paro, and she protected herself not to fall for that wicked man at that time. And because she was overprotective of herself during the time she was in captivity with him, even though that he was a king, even though that he could kill her, even though that all these things could have happened to her, but she didn't. She stayed strong. She even had help with the angels that were beating her up the whole night. Because of her actions on that night when she was in Egypt, all the women that lived in Egypt during the time when they were enslaved were protected in the merit of Sarah. Yosef ירד למצרים וגדל עצמו מן הערווה ונגדלו כל האנשים כולם בזכותו. When Yosef also went down to Egypt, he also acted in the same way as Sarah Imenu, and he protected himself from promiscuity. And all the men that lived in Egypt for the time that they were in Egypt for the 210 years also were able to be protected in the merit of Yosef. So the women were protected in the merit of Sarah. The men were protected in the merit of Yosef. אמר רבי חייא בר אבא, כדאי הוא גדר הערווה שיגאלו ישראל בזכותו מצרים. Rabbi Xiya bar Abba says that because of this, because they protected themselves, in this merit they were redeemed from Egypt. The fact that they didn't intermingle, they didn't assimilate, they didn't have relations with Egyptians. Rabbi Huna b'Shem bar Kapra, we have an additional reasoning why the Jewish people got to leave Egypt was their merit. בזכות ארבעה דברים נגאלו ישראל ממצרים. 4 things that they kept strong to is why they were redeemed from Israel. על ידי שלא שינו את שמם ולא שינו את לשונם ועל ידי שלא אמרו לשון הרע ועל ידי שלא היה בהם פרוץ ערווה. He says the only reason why, there's 4 reasons why the Jewish people merited the redemption from Egypt. Because when they were in that environment, they held on to 4 things. They didn't change their name, they didn't change their language, the Hebrew language, they spoke Hebrew. They did not speak Lashon Hara. They did not partake in evil speech. And also, Shelo Haya Behem Parutz Arva. There's not one of the Jews that lived in Egypt that was promiscuous, that had improper relationships in Egypt. Furthermore, it says, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Amitzrim Hayu Temeim Umetameim. In regards to Shulamit bat Divri, it says that the Egyptians were impure and they would look to make others impure as well. Amru, Bireh ben beno shel Dan nasa isha mishifto Shulamit bat Divri lemate Dan. They said, take a look, the son of Dan married a girl, her name is Shulamit bat Divri. She also comes to the tribe of Dan. באותו הלילה באו עליו נוגסי פרעה והרגו. Over here, the Yalkut Shimoni says that they actually came and they came to kill him. The officers that were on top of the Jewish officers. ובאו על אשתו, and they had relations with his wife, with Shulamit. והרת, and she got pregnant. והוולד הולך אחר הזרע. And it says, and the child goes according to the seed. Im matok, matok, ve'imar, mar. If the man is bitter, wicked, the child will be bitter and wicked. But if the seed, if the father is sweet, the child will be sweet. He'll be a good kid. He'll be a good person. Ve'im mar mar, but if he's bitter, he's bitter. Ve'itchil mecharef u'megadef. So we see that his character trait that came out, that his reaction was to yell, scream, curse, that comes from the side of a wicked Egyptian father.
And the Egyptians were Muslim, or?
No, there was no Muslims at that time.
So what were they?
Egyptians.
So we know.
They were Egyptians. They're offspring of the sons of Noah, specifically Ham. Furthermore, Ma'am Loaz asked the question that we asked earlier, but he gives a very good question. He says, why do we need this whole story? Couldn't the Torah have done without this story of Shulamit bat Divri and what happened with her son? The whole Torah would have been fine if it was left out. Not only that, it would have been better if this whole story was concealed in order to protect the honor of God. That you should have a person that curses Hashem, chas v'shalom. So why is this story included in the Torah? And the answer is, Mi sheba mishoresh tov eno nifshal be'avorah chamura. Anybody who comes from a good progeny, comes from a good source, from a good root, from a good shoresh, and no nifshal be'avorah chamura. He will never fail in such a sin. V'im anu ro'im sha'avar avorah chamura bevadai shoshora. And if you see a person that does a really, really harsh sin, know that his essence, his root, his progeny that he comes from is evil and bad and wicked. Or there must have been something wrong in their thinking, in their ideology, or in their actions of the father and the mother when they made him. The only reason why this person cursed God and did this action is because where he came from, his roots. That's why we have the name of Shulamit bat Divri. Once again, we could have concealed her name as well. We could have said the woman, right? A woman from the tribe of Dan. Why is it specifically Shulamit bat Divri? Why is it letting us know her name? To know that she's the source. She's the source. She was the rotten one. She had bad character trait. And from that bad character trait, this is why her son came out that way. And that's why she got into this situation to begin with. שאם לא בא אלה להודיענו שם אמו, היה צריך כתוב לומר, ויצא בן אישה ישראלית, ושם אמו שולמית בת דברי. But it says, ויקוב בן האישה. We see that the person did according to the text, we see that he did a very severe sin. Because he came from a bad root, from the source that was bad. And what is the bad source? Shulamit bat Divri and her bad character traits, and her father and his father Ish Mitzri, who was a wicked Egyptian. Furthermore, uvioter yotze me'em ra ben ra. He says a rule of thumb you should know that usually if there's a bad mother, she produces a bad son. Sheken haben nimshach achar imo, because the son usually goes after the characters of his mother. Why? Mipnei shu notzar midam vista. Because he's created from her own blood, and once he comes into this world and he breathes the air of this of the world, hu yonek michalava, he also nurses from her milk. And the complete opposite, if ha'em hi keshera, if the mother is kosher and tznuah and modest, benat tzanua. When you see, if you see a son that's righteous, that's humble, that's modest, know that his mother has the same character traits and she's kosher. Ki ha'anaf hatov ma'id al shosho. When you see a good branch, know that the roots are healthy. Meaning, when you see a good child, you know that the roots, the mother, is good as well. V'shem imo Shulamit bat Divri. So it says over here, Shulamit bat Divri. As soon as that Gentile was with her, she had the category of a zonah. Why would that happen? She was very lightheaded and she was very talkative. And every single person that she would meet, she would ask for, she would strike up a conversation. ובוודאי כל אישה מרבה דברים בני אדם סופה לזנות. He says, and there's a rule of thumb that you should know that certainly when a woman talks a lot to a lot of different men, eventually she'll sin. Eventually she'll fall to znut. ולכן נקרא שלומית בת דברי שהייתה דברנית וזה הביאה לידי זנות. And that's why that is exactly her name, because she was very talkative, and her being so talkative is what led her to this situation. Furthermore, once this was established that he blasphemed God and they had to quarantine him and they had to punish him, it's very interesting the way that they went about it. Why? Because they held him in order to get his deen. And we said that we know that if somebody just curses his mother and his father, he gets a mitah. So why would there be such a safek? Why should there be a doubt on somebody like this? So they said maybe they thought this is for a 100% Jew. However, this one is half Jew, half Egyptian. Maybe he has a different type of deen. So let's hold him until we see what his deen is. Look how careful they are and meticulous they are to make sure that they're not making the wrong decision like they did previously with Chet HaHegel. Furthermore, it says in Me'am Loez that it says that Moshe knew exactly what to do with him, but he didn't want to exact the justice on his own, because he might think that Moshe knew the law, he knew that he needed to get stoned. So what did he want to? So what he did is he says, "Let me ask God for the judgment, so people don't think that this is a personal vendetta, that I'm the one who, his father was the Egyptian, now I have it in for him as well." So it says, "Shelo tomar shezeh shaygo la'ech vod Hashem yitbarach ela mipnei sinah." So he didn't do it because God, he did something wrong in the eyes of God, but rather because of his personal hatred towards that individual, or that he wanted some sort of personal vendetta with the son of the Egyptian. So that's why he wanted to ask God for it. Lastly, before we wrap up this, all the details of the story. So, well, interestingly enough, is actually right after the story, after the stoning, as it says, after they stoned him, the following pesukim talk about ish ki kalel elokav, ish ki yakeh kol nefesh damot yumat. Come all the deans of what happens when a person actually curses God. So we see that this is put over here in order to explain the mitzvot that come right after it. I saw something in the Zohar that is very interesting as well, in regards to the guy that he was fighting with. Remember, it says the half Israelite, half Egyptian was fighting an Israelite. The Zohar says, "Vayinatzu b'machane ben ha'Yisraelit ve'ish ha'Yisraeli." So who's ben ha'Yisraelit? That is the son of Shulamit. Ish ha'Yisraeli, the Israelite, who's he? So he says, "Achei shenoda lo ha'mishamisi ba'al im ishto." He said that the husband of Shulamit, once he knew that the Egyptian slept with his wife, piresh mimena, he left her. V'nasai isha acheret, and he married a different lady. V'olid ben mimena, and he had another son. V'aben shenolad min ha'isha acheret nikra isha Yisraeli. That's his half brother. So after what happened to Shulamit, her husband was upset with her and he left. He got married again, had another child. That child is the one that met his half brother and told him, "You can't be here." והבן שלנו צריך ישראלית. והנה האיש הישראלי אמר לאישה הישראלית מתוך מחלוקת, וגילה לו שאימו זנתה עם המצרים. And over here it says that the one that revealed to him that he's the son of an Egyptian was his half brother. What a soap opera.
He's not a half brother. The father and the mother are different. He's not a half brother.
They share a father.
The father is not the father, it's the Egyptian that is the father of the bad one.
Correct.
So he's not a half
But when he
Correct.
He's not a half brother.
Correct. Correct.
but somebody if let's say he's his father, basically not the real father, but he teaches him whatever, he's become his son.
Right. But maybe we call him a stepfather. He's not even
Yeah,
a stepfather.
stepfather.
No, he's
not a
nothing.
stepfather.
But whatever, he's his mother's ex-husband. So he's the one that revealed to him. He's the one that revealed to him that he is
The product of an Egyptian.
that he is the product of that his father is the Egyptian. Miyad vayikov bnei Ishai Yisrael shekilel et Hashem kedei lagen el imo. And the reason why he did that is he wanted to protect his mother's honor.
ממש צדיק.
Okay. I saw a couple of interesting chidushim in regards to this because there's more to it. It's incredible. It's literally just 3 pesukim, 4 pesukim in the end of the parasha, but there's so much depth to it as usual. Baruch Hashem. It says in Bereshit Rabbah. In Bereshit Rabbah, in Vayikra Rabbah it says, remember we said Vayitze ben Isha Yisraelit, he came out, right? Me'echan yatza, Vayikra Rabbah asks, when did he come from this half Jew, half Egyptian? Rabbi Bechia אומר, מפרשה שלמעלה יצא לגלג ואמר, ביום השבת יערכנו, דרך המלך לאכול פת חמה בכל יום, וכי נאה למלך לאכול פת צוננת של 9 ימים? If you go to the previous pesukim in the parasha, it talks about lechem hapanim. Lechem hapanim is the showbread that was in the Mishkan that stayed hot for 7 days, and then on the 8th day they would take it out and they would eat it, the Kohanim. So when he came out, he started to sort of like make fun of lechem hapanim. He would say like this. He says, the king eats, a human king eats bread, fresh bread every day. Is it possible that a king of all kings will eat bread that is cold, that is 9 days old? Meaning he's making fun of lechem hapanim, and he's also putting down the whole process of lechem hapanim. So they ask over here, in Sefer V'imrot Noam, of the Rav Avraham Abichze, says, "Madua ra lelagleg davka al mitzvah shel echat lechem panim." Out of all the things that this guy could have complained about, out of all the mitzvot that Moshe Rabbeinu was teaching him, why did he have to make fun of the bread? Why not a different mitzvah? He says because in the Torah, another way of saying woman is bread. When you say a person's bread, it's like saying a person's woman. Where do we get that from? From Yosef. Remember Yosef, it says over there about Potiphar, on the pasuk about Potiphar and Potiphar's wife. It says, "Ve'azov kol asher lo beyad Yosef, ve'lo yada ito me'uma ki im halechem asher hu ochel." He said Potiphar left everything in the hands of Yosef, and he didn't leave not a single thing that he wasn't control of, except for the bread that he eats. Rashi says the bread that he eats, zo ishto shel Potiphar. Ki im halechem, zo ishto shel Potiphar, ela shediber b'lashon nekiya. The bread that he eats, this is Potiphar's wife, and the reason why they call it bread is in order to use a clean language. So why did the Ben Isha Yisraeli with the half man, half Egyptian use exactly this example for the bread? Because it has to do with the woman. So it says he could have dealt with lechem hapanim shebakodesh, או חליל להיות לחם של איסור. We know that the lechem hapanim has to be eaten in a holy way, or sometimes you have, if a person eats lechem hapanim not in a holy way, he transgresses. So if a woman is bread, which woman was bread that was eaten in a non-proper way, that was taken in a non-proper way? His mother. So he says, חליל להיות בחינה לחם של איסור, היינו שאימו של זה היא בחינת לחם. His mother is like bread, קלקלה באיסור אשת איש. It's the rotten bread, or the bread that got ruined when she went with the Egyptian. That was a very interesting play on words for the word lechem. This one, I don't know if it's even connected to our lesson, but it's so interesting I had to share it with you guys. There's a big rabbi called Rav Yehuda Patya. Rabbi Yehuda Patya is the rabbi that talks to the spirits. And I saw it brought over here in the book of the reincarnations, in the Mishnat HaGilgulim, it says, Besefer Minchat Yehuda, that Rabbi Yehuda Patya Zatzal wrote, and this is what he writes in his book. Ra'iti bechalom, he said, I saw in a dream, כי המגדף בין האיש המצרי והאישה הישראלית נתגלגל אחר כך בשמשון בן מנוח. He says that this Megadef, the one that cursed God, he later on got reincarnated as Samson, as Shimshon. ואחר כך באותו האיש יימח שמו וזכרו. And later on he got reincarnated in J.C. Penney. שהיה הוגה את השם באותיותיו. What was the thing that Yimach Shemo V'Zichro did? He used God's holy name in the wrong way. Similarly, like the Megadef used God's name, holy name in the wrong way. Furthermore, and not only that, there's a pasuk in Hosea that says that Yimach Shemo V'Zichro would say, "U'mimitzrayim karati lebni," that from Egypt I called my son. Why would it say from Egypt I called my son? Because he's from Egypt. Al Sheikha ben Ish Mitzi, because the main part of his reality was that he was half an Egyptian. V'gam hu haya ben Ish Zona. He was also the son of a harlot, of a woman that was promiscuous. Miriam Magdala, that her name was Miriam from Magdalene. So we know that his mother, Yeshu's mother, was also promiscuous. There wasn't an immaculate conception. What they did is they tried to cover up the story that she was a zona, right? So it says, שלא יבזו בדו הנוצרים את הסיפור של רוח הקודש. He says, in order for them not to embarrass Yoshka, and also not to have an embarrassing, mark on the story, they said that the way that she got pregnant is the immaculate conception. But in reality, she was also with another man. She wasn't with her husband. So we see a parallel in the story of the Megadef, that he was from Egyptian, the way he came to life, he later on got reincarnated or his soul spark was in Yimach Shemo V'Zichro, that his mom also slept with another man. Also, they had a different story, but for their story they had to cover it up, and they called it the Immaculate Conception. That was very interesting.
But how does it connect to Shimshon?
Shimshon, I didn't go into it. It says that it went to him. The connection with Shimshon is all three died a gruesome death. Shimshon was with the rocks that fell upon him. The Megadef, he got stoned, and Yoshka got crucified.
His mother was also
So we've just completed a nice, thorough learning of the Megadef. Interesting fact is that as he's being quarantined, he's being held, who's in the neighboring cell? Another individual called the Mekoshesh. In order to understand the story of the Mekoshesh, you have to go to Sefer Bamidbar, and it recounts the entire story of the Mekoshesh, also not very long. However, very interesting. So again, let's leave it off where we have the blasphemer in jail right now, sitting in a room. And at the exact same time, there's somebody else that's being quarantined also for a different sin. And this is called the Mekoshesh, the one that was gathering wood on Shabbat. And they're both waiting for their sentence. They're both waiting for Moshe Rabbeinu to give them the instructions of what to do with them. So, first of all, I would say it's very interesting that it happened on the same day. Very interesting that they're right next to each other. And why would it be? Obviously, there's something to learn over here from both the stories, the similarities in their stories, the differences in the stories, and the takeaways. We'll get to that in a little bit. First, let's just do not such a long review of the Mekoshesh. This one's going to be a lot shorter, but let's just get the general broad strokes of that story. So, first of all, you see She'en Mugdam Me'ochar B'Torah. You can see that you can go through Reshit, Shemot, Vayikra, Bamidbar. Bamidbar, you go to a whole different book. You go to Parashat Shelach Lecha, the story of the spies. And at the end of the parasha that deals with the spies, you're going to hear the story of the Mekoshesh. And it's actually the same thing that's happening in this week's parasha. So you can see, they could have said it over there. But there's En Mugdam Me'ochar B'Torah. There's a reason why they're in two different places. We'll get to that in a second. So the Jewish people are in the desert, and they found this person gathering wood on Shabbat. Now, why is this important to know? Because you have to understand, if you're going to make somebody liable for punishment, first what you have to do is you have to warn them. You have to do a hatra'ah. You can't punish somebody if you didn't warn them first. So it says, Hitrubo. They warned him, Vamrulo, Re'eh, V'al tekoshesh etzim ki Shabbat hayom. Be careful, don't gather wood, it's Shabbat. V'zeh shata oseh, asur. And whatever you're doing right now is forbidden. V'sha'oseh ken chayav mita. And somebody who collects wood on Shabbat is going to be sentenced to death. U'bechol zot lo shama lekolam. Even though that they warned him, he didn't listen to them, and he continued to gather wood. And that's why the pasuk continues to say, they now went again for a second time, and they grabbed him, and they took him from gathering his trees. So they took him, they passed him on to Moshe, Aaron, and all the people that were with them at that time, and they left him quarantined because nobody knows what to do with such a situation. Because we did get a pasuk that says about Shabbat, Mechaleleha mot yumad. Anybody who doesn't keep the Shabbat dies. But how? There's so many different ways to die. How do you kill this guy that gathered wood? Lo יודעים באיזו מיתה, חנק, סקילה, סתם מות יומא. They didn't know which type of method of killing for somebody that transgresses on Shabbat. So they waited for Kadosh Baruch Hu to give him an answer. There's a beautiful kaf zchut learning on this, that they said that actually the person that they warned and they told him don't collect the wood, and he still did it, he wasn't evil, he was actually a good guy. Ela Adam kasher hu. And his name was, does anybody know their name? Tzlofchad. His name is Tzlofchad ben Hefer Mishevet Yosef. V'kavanto hayta l'shem shamayim. And his intentions were for the sake of heaven. What was his intention? He put two and two together. He said, They saw that the Jewish people become lackadaisical in the service of Shabbat. And they don't know the severity of somebody who makes light of Shabbat. Mechalel Shabbat, doesn't keep Shabbat. That's why he had the courage to not keep Shabbat, so that they judge him for death, and then everybody will know. So everybody will be scared not to break the Shabbat, and they'll know that somebody who doesn't keep Shabbat His fate is stoning. And that's why he did the sin, in order to teach the Jewish people.
So what, the Shem Shammai?
The Shem Shammai. As a matter of fact, it's hinted in his name. I believe is Bet Levi, if I'm not mistaken. I believe it's him. It says that his name is Tzlofchad. Why is his name Tzlofchad? He says actually take his name and cut it in two. Tzel Pachad. He says he wanted to do what? To make sure that people have fear of making a sin. He says that I have to instill fear in people, even if it costs me my life. Tzel Pachad. There should be in the shade of fear of God. It's even hinted in his name. Continues to say that here, we'll just make a small little distinction, that when they came to stone Tzlofchad, Vayagemoto be'avanim vayamot, they stoned them with a lot of stones. In the Megadef, it says Evan. So one question over here is why over here Avanim and over there Evan? He says HaMekalel ragmu be'evan, v'mekoshesh ragmu be'avanim. Why is it that the blasphemer got stoned with one stone, and over here the mekoshesh is many stones? So they had a beautiful answer over here. It says, because there is an opinion that what he did was l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven. So there were some people that understood his way, and some people that didn't understand his way. Some people that supported what he did, and some people that said, no, he should get punished. So because there was Arbeh De'ot, because there were a lot of different opinions, there were a lot of different stones that he got stoned in. However, when it came to the Megadef, they all knew that he did wrong, and when they did Evan, shows that what? That they were all united in the opinion, and they threw an Evan as if they were all united and throwing one stone. That was very nice as well. Okay, we've laid down the two stories. I want to ask some questions and we'll wrap it up.
In the second case, he wasn't the father of, like he wanted to get into Eretz Israel and...
That's Bnot Tzlofchad, his daughters.
Right.
His daughters, because he only had daughters, he had no sons, and there was a question of the inheritance.
Right,
another similarity that you see also, Bnot Tzlofchad had an issue with their father. The Megadef also had an issue with the father. Another similarity in the story.
I think the father was upset because they didn't go into Eretz Israel, and he said that if the Torah tells you to get in, if you accept not to get in, then you're violating the Torah. Then I'm not going to listen to the Torah anymore.
Who's saying this?
I thought I heard it, but maybe
I'm not familiar with that, but maybe there's something there. So let's ask a question: Why were they quarantined at the same time? Why does the wood collector on Shabbat and the man that cursed God happen to be in the same place at the same time? Not only that, they were tried for two different sins, and they also received the same fate. Notice that their punishment was identical. Furthermore, if you look closely to the story, there's a lot more similarities that once we point them out, you'll see that it's very interesting that these two characters are interconnected in such a way. First similarity is that both stories speak about an individual person. One is a Mekoshesh, one is a Megadesh. Both stories, they don't mention the person, the name of the person. The Torah does not mention the name of the person. Both situations, the sinner came to a judgment because witnesses saw them. Witnesses turned them in. Both scenarios we have where the sinners were put into quarantine because in both cases they didn't know what their judgment was. and they didn't know what they had. It wasn't clear what the nation had to do, and even the Bet Din didn't know what they had to do. In both cases, they needed to ask God for what's the right way to exact judgment in such a case. Furthermore, even when they did get a judgment, they both had a similar fate, that both were punished to sekila, meaning stoning outside of the camp, and the punishment was exacted by the people. The people are the ones that stoned them. And in both scenarios, they had we have a description of the judgment, and we have a description of the actual punishment as well. And if you look closely at the parashiyot that they're embedded in, both these cases are sort of like covered or embedded in a parasha that is filled with mitzvot. Parashat Kedoshim, Parashat Emor, and Parashat Shelach Lecha is filled with mitzvot of what a person is supposed to do and not to do. Mitzvot taseh, mitzvot lo taseh. And all of a sudden we have these two weird stories right in the middle. Furthermore, we see that there is a running theme with the Mekalel and a running theme with the Megadef. The running theme with the blasphemer is that he sinned. His sin was against God and against the Jewish people. Meaning what? The Mekoshesh and the Megadef, he complained about the order of encampment. He had an issue with the people. That's why he went to fight with people. And the second issue that he had is he made light of Lechem HaPanim. Remember, he made light of the laws of the bread. And furthermore, he cursed Moshe Rabbeinu and he cursed God. We see when it came to the Mekoshesh, he also had an issue, and his issue was that he went against the word of God. So we see that what is similar to them is that both of them went against God. The blasphemer went against God with speech. The wood collector went against God with action. So we see over here that they did the exact same thing, got the exact same punishment, but the way that they got in trouble was in two different ways. One through speech, one through action. And here we're going to start learning, start extracting some life lessons. We see that sometimes we think that when we do something, it should be more serious than when we say something. Here the Torah is teaching us that your words are just as powerful as actions. So much that an action warrants death, speech warrants death also. Look at the power of words. Look at the power of speech. There are actually words that a person can say that can bring death upon him. We see that cursing a mother and a father warrants death. Cursing God, Chas v'Shalom, warrants death. Look at the power of speech. There's no saying, oh, sorry, it slipped. There's no, it slipped. And similarly, we see that actual actions, when a person says, God says, don't do this, and you do it anyways, warrants death also. So we see that life is very, very sensitive. You have to be very, very careful on what you talk about and what you do. If we look closely into the whole story of what we reviewed tonight, it's something that's very interesting. Shimrit bat Divrid, let's start with her. Seems to be just a super friendly wife. I mean, super friendly woman, right? She's just out in the marketplace. Hey, what's up? How you doing? Everybody good? Okay, I'm all right. Right? Everybody knows her. Everybody talks to her. What's the problem with that? Well, the Gemara tells us, "Asara kabin sicha yadu la'olam." There are 10 measures of speech that came down to the world. Tesha natlu nashim. 9/10 of the world's speech, the woman took. So a woman, by nature, is very talkative. Women like to talk. They like to talk to their husbands. They like to talk to their girlfriends. They like to talk. They like to constantly express themselves. They need to let it out, right? So if you know that about yourself, if you know that 9/10 of the world's speech is taken by women, so you have to watch your speech. You have to know that there's a negative aspect to that as well. You have to guard your tongue. You know, when a person has a lack of tzniut coupled with an excessive habit of talking, it drew Shulamit to rape and having a son that's a mamzer, the first bastard that we see in the Torah. How is that possible? Because you have to understand certain things are a gift, but can turn into a curse if you don't use them properly. You can totally look at Shulamit Bat Divri as a victim, but you can also see that she didn't know how to use the gifts that were given to her, and she misused her 9/10 kabin of sicha, and she took the negative aspect of it. From here, we can, you know, if you pay attention to the Torah, a lot of the times it could have chosen a lot of other stories to teach us. The reason why it's teaching us this gruesome story is to teach us for a woman to be very, very careful with the way she carries herself, and to be very, very careful with her speech as well. Why? Because it could lead to a very, very grim result. Not only rape, not only mamzer, but also that the child will be a child that comes out MEGADEF THE Hashem, a child that curses God. So if you know that things like this can happen, and the Torah goes out of its way to teach us that things like this have happened, then you have to say, wait, I have to play defense. I learned for Shulamit Ben Divri to what? Watch what I say, how I say, and who I talk to. And when I'm married, I don't go out into the street and talk to other men. Because why? Men are crazy, and they might like you, and they might, Chas v'shalom, do what they do. We see this nowadays. It's not a common thing, but it's definitely not uncommon for men to obsess over women and whatever happens. There's shows like murder mysteries on TV that they used to show about men that obsess over women, whether they were theirs or somebody else's. It's a real thing. This might have been like a murder mystery in in Egypt one of these days, in one of these shows.
We say it in French. Il faut tourner la langue 7 fois avant de parler. You have to turn your 7 times.
What does it mean?
Oh, where's your voice? Translation, please.
Pardon? Yeah. No,
What is
before
it?
You speak. You have to turn your tongue 7 times before
Very nice.
you say the word.
You have to be careful. Very nice.
Voilà.
Okay, one other thing that I saw here in Imre Noam that I want to share with you guys. It says, pay attention. Whatever happened with Shulamit Ben Divri happened. The child, the way that he was, it says, it's possible that a person could be completely blemished in all his actions. And he might do a lot of things that are against the Torah. Not keep Shabbat, not keep proper relations, cause all these things that a person can sin. בכל זמן שלשונו נקייה מדברי נבלות, פה ולשון והרע וחירות וכדומה, he says, but as long as that person is still holding on to one thing, that he doesn't have a filthy mouth, he doesn't curse, he doesn't say evil speech, he doesn't gossip, and everything else, using his speech in the wrong way, הקדוש ברוך הוא יאריך פה עמו ויסבול אותו עד הקצה האחרון. Hashem will be long-winded with him. He'll give him a chance. He'll even suffer with him up until for a very long time to give him a chance to come back. As long as he has at least he has a clean mouth. However, the minute that a person when a person starts to ruin his speech and he starts to say things that are filthy, meaning things that are improper, foul language, evil speech, gossip, at that moment there's no more long-windedness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Miyad HaKadosh Baruch Hu yastir panav mimeno. Immediately Hashem turns his back from that individual. כי אין לך דבר בעולם הגורם שהקדוש ברוך הוא יתרחק מהאדם כמו פגם הלשון. There's one thing that distances a person away from God more than anything else, like a person who has a filthy mouth. Similarly, is a person who feels that they can speak negatively against rabbis, righteous Torah learners, He says that person has to be very, very careful, and he has to know that this is something probably that stems from his mother. That his mother used to be talk like this. That's why he's talking like this. This is why the Egyptian was pagum in his language. He was blemished in his speech because his mother was blemished in her speech when she was to go out and speak to everyone, and that's why he was the one that. That's why God wouldn't tolerate him anymore, because the minute he ruined his speech, even though that whatever they had a rough story over there, Hashem was willing to tolerate it and deal with it. But the minute he used his speech in the wrong way, which was a sign from his upbringing or from the DNA of his mom, Hashem immediately had wanted to have nothing to do with him. By the way, I can just tell you a story, a local story that I heard recently, that there was a very rich guy that was supporting a kollel, and he felt that he could come anytime to the kollel and just choose any of the avrechim and learn with them and be sort of like rough and rude with them, So they would come during. He came one time during their lunch hour, which was like I think between like 12:30 and 1:30. And they just sat down at 12:30. So just as they're about to eat, he comes in and he said, "This guy, you, come with me." He had like no derech eretz with him. So he told him, "What is it?" He says, "No, come with me. When I tell you to come, you come with me." He dealt with him with a very, very nice, not a nice way. But the Avrech had no problem. Those guys have no problem to get embarrassed and to be put down. They know how to deal with it. He put his food away. He says, no problem. Later on, it was brought to my attention from the guy that told me the story, is that there's a Mishnah that says you have to be very, very careful with the honor of a Talmid Chacham. Because if you don't honor a Talmid Chacham, he says that you get the bite. You get the bite of a snake. That guy fell sick for a very long time, and it took him about a few months before he connected the dots until he understood that because he insulted that big Talmid Chacham during that time, he went and he begged him for forgiveness, and only after he forgave him, he came out of the situation that he's in. You have to be very, very careful with your speech, especially to a Moshe Rabbeinu or to a Talmid Chacham or to a Torah learner. Furthermore, we see that according to the punishment that they got, which was both of them got the stoning, we see that our speech is just as strong as our actions, because the severity of the punishment is the same. I have a book that I got from a good friend of mine called Classics and Beyond from Rabbi Avram Bookspan, and he had a beautiful chidush over here that I want to share with you guys in regards to this week's parasha. It says, that Rashi tells us that the Mekalel, the blasphemer, was locked up separately from the Mekoshesh, the wood gatherer, because at that point they needed clarification from each case. Well, they wood, because we know somebody who desecrates Shabbat is put to death, so they knew the wood gatherer would be put to death, but they didn't know which way, right? They didn't know which manner of the execution. And in the blasphemer, they needed to clarify whether he deserved the death sentence at all. They didn't know what to do with him. So because they had a question about their fate, they kept him in separate rooms. The Siftei Chachamim on Rashi says, what's the big deal to put them together? They're both bad guys. Put them in the same room. What's the big deal? He says, putting someone who the courts may not execute, along with a person who's certainly on death row, you can cause unwarranted anguish and pain. He says, if one guy that is for sure dying, and another guy that we don't know if he's going to for sure die or not, if you put him in the same room, that guy who doesn't know if he's going to get, the death sentence, it's going to give him anguish and pain that's unwarranted. So what do we care? These are bad guys, right? comes Siftei Chachamim and says that even to the bad guys, look how the Torah is. Look what they did. That to save him from unnecessary anxiety, they kept him apart. The Torah is teaching us that we have to be sensitive to other people. That even though they're Reshaim, be sensitive to them as well. In those moments, be sensitive to them. They talk about the war right now. They're talking about who's the animal, who's not, who's the real terrorist, who's not, right? All the different things. They don't look at the beauty of our Torah. Come and let them come learn about the Mekoshesh and the Megadef, and they'll see if we're really good people or not, and what we take into consideration or not. Furthermore, it says, why would there be a doubt whether the Mekalel would receive a death sentence? We said if a person curses his parents, a death penalty is mandated. Kal vachomer for Hashem. He says, however, even though it was worse, we know that some punishments are exacted by a bet din, which is actually a human bet din, like a proper bet din. But sometimes when things are so severe, they don't get punished below. They get punished from bet din mishamayim. So there's a reality that a person can do something worse and get zero punishment here below, because we leave it to Hashem. So they said, if it's kal vachomer, that he's what? That if a person curses a mother and a father, he dies. Shouldn't he be? They say, yeah, you know what? If it's kal vachomer, that it's more, then maybe what he's going to get punishment is not from a regular bedin. Bedin shel shamayim. Hashem will deal with him. Pause, stop, we don't know. Another beautiful point of why they held him. Perhaps his fate shall be left to Hashem. Final point is the Torah is teaching us that we can't take any liberties when it comes to inflicting needless distress. Even if the decision would have been to leave him alone and have his fate determined by heaven, and even if he would be with the wood gatherer even for a short period of time, we would be inflicting undue aggravation to him. So look at the distance that we go to avoid hurting people that are wicked without authorization. Kal vachomer, people that are in our lives, how we should be very, very careful not to bother people, not to cause anguish, not to give anxiety, not to give despair. If they were so careful with these two Reshaim to be what? Not in the same room, not to give them unnecessary anguish, how careful should we be with our people that are not Reshaim, how not to give them that as well. Furthermore, look how dangerous assimilation is. A little bit from last week's lesson. Remember, we said we have to be very, very careful when it comes to being in Goyish society. Why? Because when you come to Goyish society, you might end up being with them, and then you become like them, and then we lose more Jews in the process. 210 years the Jewish people are in Egypt. And the Torah comes and tells us, look at the one-time assimilation happening. The one time that you had assimilation, look at the story. Look what happened when a Jew and a Gentile got together, and the product of those children. Again, another reason why the Torah mentions the story, because we could say that the whole Torah would have been fine without telling us the rest of the story, to show us, here's one example when a Jew and an Egyptian got together. What can we say nowadays? How many Jews and Gentiles are getting together? How many megadefim we have around the world? How many children that are off the derech, that who knows what's in their mind and what's in their actions? Lastly, Tzlofchad, you could say, is like, what a tzaddik! He's willing to die to teach the Jewish people to keep Shabbat. Tzlofchad, who told you to do this? Who told you to go on this suicide mission? Who gave you permission to give up your life? Who gave you permission to do this? Not only that, notice, everybody went to who? To Moshe Rabbeinu. What do we do in this case? You're on the side of Kedusha. You don't go to your rabbi? Rabbi, should I commit suicide so everybody can keep Shabbat? Surely Moshe Rabbeinu would tell them, what are you, out of your mind? Go eat more man. Go have more emunah. Don't worry, we'll be fine. Who said? How many stories have we had in the previous classes that we've learned about the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Everybody had a good reason for what they wanted to do.
Our own sons.
Huh?
Our own sons as well.
Our own sons, right? We had Aaron, we had Noah, we had Adam and Chava. Everybody has a good intention of why they want to do the wrong thing. Tzuruf Chad, who told you? Not only that, we know that the Jewish people kept the first Shabbat in the desert. The second Shabbat, they didn't keep. Why? Because Tzuruf Chad was not Mekoshesh. You were so sure. Maybe if you wouldn't have done that, we've had the second Shabbat that everybody keeps. 2 Shabbatot in a row.
That's it.
So he also ruined that thing. So who asked you for this suicide mission? And one last thing that is noticeable in regards to Shevet Dan. But Shevet Dan doesn't have such a great reputation as a tribe to begin with. They were the last ones. They were the closest one to the Erev Rav. But we see that even Shevet Dan, when a half Jew, half Gentile came to be with them, what did they say? No, thank you. They stopped. They protected their environment. They said, no, thank you. We don't want you next to my daughter, next to my son, next to my wife, next to my family. They drew the line. In reality, they did something good because you have to protect your environment. Again, let's go back to last week's lesson that we said. I have to be very careful of where you live, how you live, and the people that are around you. Rabbi Shimshon Pincus, that whole thing, that the Jew is a mirror. They said, no. If you're going to be around us, you'll corrupt us. We don't take chances that we'll improve you. There's a chance that you'll corrupt us. And now they say, no. Because we're not always the ones that are able to help everyone else. You have to go to qualified people. That's what they said. Go to Moshe Rabbeinu. He'll tell you what to do with you. We can't decide for you. You can't decide for yourself either. Go to Moshe Rabbeinu. So we see over here 2 mega lessons, 2 mega takeaways. One, you must protect your environment, protect your children, protect your home, protect your family. Because there might be an Egyptian around the corner. And secondly, if there is anything that needs to be done in the way of God and has to do with a religion, go ask your rabbi. Aser harav, etzeh min hasafek. You have to have a rabbi that gives you instruction. It's your life's work to find a good, righteous, kosher rabbi that you can trust, that you test, that he's proven himself, has a good track record, he's a Torah learner, he teaches Torah, he learns Torah, he promotes Torah, he does all the things that a good rabbi does, and you say, you know what, you're my rabbi, you're my Moshe Rabbeinu. And from him, you take instructions for every single thing in your life. You must have one of those. It's your life mission to find one. And once you have a Rav, these things don't happen. Nobody makes their own decisions on how to become a better Jew or how to teach the Jewish nation a better way to be. Everybody's got ideas. I think Shlomo HaMelech has the pasuk, I don't know if I can quote it off the top of my head, but it says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created man straight. V'hem osim cheshbonot. Meaning, throughout history, instead of choosing the right path of the Torah, everybody is making sort of like their personal discounts to the situation because they had good intentions. Ezat Hashem, that we take the story of the MEGADEF and the MEKOSHESH, and we understand that there's a lot of things that we could learn from their personal stories to our day-to-day life, because what they experienced in the desert is not so far from what we're experiencing today. We're able to extract at least 8 or 9 do's and don'ts from a guy that cursed and from a guy that collected wood for our day-to-day life. Shashem Barech Etchem, Sameach Etchem. Looking forward to our next class, which is going to be in South Beach for Tanya, and then we have the Tefillah 101 class this week.